we are going to talk about autonomic nervous system. Some people call that this is general visceral efferent system. This is general visceral efferent system. One way to remember the supply of autonomic nervous system is that autonomic nervous system is supplying all smooth muscles in the body, all, yes please, smooth muscles in the body, wherever they are. Either they are in GIT or the bronchi or the smooth muscles are present in the iris or anywhere. All the smooth muscles in the body. Secondly, autonomic nervous system supplies all the glands, all the glandular structures, wherever they are. Structures. Number 3, that they supply the myocardium. That's heart. So in a nutshell, we can say that autonomic nervous system is basically concerned with it's a motor system dominantly, even though it has sensory fibers as well. It's a motor system, and this system is mainly concerned with the control of involuntary movements, right? For example, or involuntary motor responses in the body. For example, it can control the smooth muscle activity, it can control the glandular activity, it can control the myocardial activity. It may be specialized myocardium or non-specialized myocardium. Specialized myocardium means SA node, AV node or Purkinje fibers. Non-specialized means general myocardium for atrial contraction or ventricular contraction. Another way to narrate the fact is, another way to narrate the same fact is that autonomic nervous system innervates. It innervates, yes, all the structures in the body, all innervates all innervated structures in body except, yes, the only exception is except neuromuscular junctions of skeletal muscles. And you know, smooth muscle activity, glandular activity and cardiac activity is usually, yes, voluntary or involuntary? Involuntary. Involuntary. So what is autonomic nervous system? It is mainly general visceral efferent system. It's mainly general visceral efferent system and dominantly motor system, right? It is concerned with the innervation of every structure in the body except your neuromuscular junction and skeletal muscle. The remaining all structures are either they are smooth muscles or they are glands or that is the myocardium. Is that right? Anatomically, we divide the autonomic nervous system anatomically. That was about innervation. Anatomically, we divide into 3 divisions. There are 3 divisions of autonomic nervous system, right? And these 3 divisions, 2 divisions somehow students always remember, right? And third, I don't know what's the reason, they usually forget, right? There are 3 anatomical divisions of it, right? Number 1 is sympathetic division. Sympathetic division which sympathizes with you, right? Sympathetic division is activated when you really need some sympathy. For example, when you are under stress, you are under emotional stress or you are under physical stress. For example, there is pain, sympathetic activity will go up. Or if you are emotionally distressed, sympathetic activity will go up, right? So sympathetic nervous system is mainly concerned with your fight or flight or fright responses. For example, if there is something threatening to you, for the very big dog, then you will decide for flight. And if there is a small dog bothering you, you will decide to fight, right? And if a big dog really approaches you, you will have fright. So under all these circumstances, when there is any type of stress, right, which is alarming you, which is distressing you, its stress may be physical stress or emotional stress or even these days any type of stress, right, that will increase sympathetic activity in the body. Opposite to that, when your central nervous system perceives that stress level or threatening level in the environment is less, right? And you are very, very comfortable, right? And you really love to rest and digest, right? The part of autonomic nervous system which is dominantly working is parasympathetic. Parasympathetic. So parasympathetic division of the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, we also call it for rest and digest. I mean, when you are really comfortable, right, and you are conserving energy, here you will digest very well and you will conserve energy. Here you will utilize energy, and it's worth it when a big threatening thing is after you, right? And third division of autonomic nervous system is, yes please, enteric nervous system, which we'll talk later. Enteric nervous system, right? Within the GIT there are enteric plexus and there are Orbeck plexus. You know, there are plexus which are controlling the GIT secretions, they are controlling the absorption rate, secretory rate and motility of the GIT, right? So that nervous system which is present within the GIT, that is called enteric nervous system, which is of course influenced by sympathetic and parasympathetic both divisions, right? But the neurons, mainly enteric nervous system, is mainly resident within the GIT wall. Is that right? Either it is enteric plexus or submucosal plexus. Is that right? And the total number of neurons which are present in enteric nervous system, that is equal to the number of neurons which are present in spinal cord. Is that right? Now, today we will mainly concentrate on sympathetic division, that how sympathetic division is activated. First of all, we will talk about its basic anatomical structure, how the sympathetic nervous system is activated, what type of neurotransmitter it releases, what kind of receptors are acted upon by the sympathetic division, and what type of tissue responses are seen, and how those tissue responses help us during the stressful circumstances, right? So let's go into detail and discuss about sympathetic nervous system. Now, to understand the activation and execution of function of sympathetic nervous system, we must take some example in which someone is threatening by some activity. Let's suppose there is a friend of mine there. Who is coming here? He is a model of our sympathetic nervous system. Yes. Yes, please, Abid. So we'll see in this young man how sympathetic nervous system can be activated, right? Now you just imagine he's young, right? And yesterday night he was on the road moving, and you know, life is good. He has given his step 1, result was very good, so he's whistling around and thinking all the future things, right? And very good mood. And suddenly emergency develops. It's about moonlight and 3 o'clock at midnight. He is walking in the woods. Road is passing through the woods. Suddenly a very big black dog appears, and it challenges him first verbally, barking. And when he turns back, he sees that size of the dog is progressively increasing and rapidly. Do you think he will keep on whistling and strolling about the way he was, or there will be some sudden changes in his body? There will be a lot of changes. His central nervous system, here it is, his central nervous system will perceive a threatening situation, and then step number one, central nervous system should perceive the threat. Number 2, central nervous system should activate the sympathetic nervous system. So highest sympathetic or autonomic centers should be activated, and when highest sympathetic centers are activated, of course that is hypothalamus. Descending pathways should come to the spinal cord, as I will draw and show you. From the spinal cord, sympathetic pre-ganglionic fibers will come out, and then they will activate the sympathetic ganglion. Then post-ganglionic fibers will be stimulated, and post-ganglionic fibers and adrenal medulla, when they are stimulated, post-ganglionic fibers will be releasing norepinephrine to the target tissues, and adrenal medulla will be releasing epinephrine into circulation, and epinephrine through the circulation will go to all the tissues right? And it will act upon the tissues wherever adrenergic receptors are present. So what really happens? Again, listen. Step number 1, perception of the threat. Step number 2, activation of central sympathetic command. Step number 3, sympathetic outflow through pre-ganglionic system. Next step, activation of, yes, post-ganglionic sympathetic fibers and adrenal medulla. Release of norepinephrine from the post-ganglionic nerve endings on the tissue. Post-ganglionic nerve endings release norepinephrine on the tissue, and from the adrenal medulla, epinephrine is released in blood, and this epinephrine will keep on circulating. And so every tissue which is decorated with adrenergic receptors, it may be heart, or it may be GIT, or it may be his blood vessels, or whatever. In his body, there are a lot of tissues which are decorated or pasted with adrenergic receptors. So adrenergic receptors will receive norepinephrine through the innervation, and they will receive epinephrine through the circulation. Then tissues will adjust their activity automatically. The tissues which are going to help him to fight with the dog or flight from the dog, the tissue, look, now body tissues can be divided under this stressful circumstances into 2 types of tissues. Tissues which can help him under the stress, and tissues which do not help him under the stress. So when sympathetic nervous system will be activated, it should increase the activity of all those tissues which help the stressful circumstances. For example, heart rate should increase. Is that right? Opposite to that, those tissues which do not help him to fight with the stress, right? Those tissues activity will be reduced. For example, this young man has eaten 3 chicken pieces in celebration of his passing exam. Now, those chicken leg pieces are present in his stomach, and big dog is after him. Do you think it's an urgency to save his leg piece from the dog, or it's urgency to digest this leg piece of the, so he has to save his own leg piece. So what is important? His muscle should become more active, blood supply to muscle should be more, and he should fly away, right? And GAD activity should be increased or decreased? It should be decreased. The hen leg piece, a chicken leg piece, he can digest later on, right? That is not the urgency. Am I clear? So what I really want to put in your mind, that when there is lot of stress, central nervous system perceives the stress, it activates highest autonomic nervous system, and in the highest autonomic nervous system, there is an alteration in the function. Sympathetic activity goes up, parasympathetic activity goes down. When sympathetic activity goes up, right, again, pre-ganglionic fibers come out, they activate the post-ganglionic fibers and adrenal medullae. And there is release of norepinephrine directly on the innervated tissues, and there is release of epinephrine in the circulation by the adrenal medullae. All the tissues which are loaded or decorated with the adrenergic receptors, they receive either norepinephrine through the innervation, or they receive the epinephrine through the circulation. Now, epinephrine and norepinephrine has altered the function of the tissues. Now, how this will alter the function of the tissue? Tissue's function should be altered in such a way that this young man's body should be able to respond to in a most optimum way to the stress. Is that right? Now, how it should happen? All those tissues which can help him to fight with the stress, right, they should be stimulated. And all those tissues which do not help him to fight with the stress, they should be for a while inhibited. So what really happens? Cardiovascular system should be stimulated, right? But GID system should be inhibited, right? So we have to now go and discuss all of this detail. We will talk about the step number 1, that how his central nervous system perceives the threat, right? Let's suppose this is his central nervous system. Now, this is cerebral hemisphere, there is brain stem, there is spinal cord and cerebellum. The highest autonomic control is coming from basically hypothalamus. You know, hypothalamus is a structure over here. What is this gland under the hypothalamus? Yeah, this is anterior pituitary, and here it is posterior pituitary, and this structure is, yes please, hypothalamus, right. In the hypothalamus, there are 2 areas. There are ventromedial area, look here, if this is hypothalamus, right, it has, of course, right half and the left half. Hypothalamus is a sheet of grey matter which has identical right half and left half, right? This is present just above the pituitary and system, right? Now, hypothalamus, which is present over here, it can be made into two divisions. This part of the hypothalamus is anteromedial part, and this part of the hypothalamus is posterolateral part, right? I mean that this is anteromedial part of the hypothalamus, yes, and here it is, what it is? Posterolateral part of hypothalamus. What you really need to remember, that this anteromedial part, this is mainly when you, by electrodes you stimulate, parasympathetic activity is increased in the body, and so this is basically concerned with parasympathetic activity. The neurons which are diffusely present in anteromedial part of hypothalamus, when they are stimulated, there is increased parasympathetic outflow. Opposite to that, the neurons which are present on posterolateral part of the hypothalamus, when they are electrically stimulated, there is increased sympathetic activity. It means the highest autonomic center, one of the highest autonomic center which is major, is present in the hypothalamus, and anteromedial part of hypothalamus is, yes, concerned with parasympathetic activity, and posterolateral part of hypothalamus is concerned with, yes please, sympathetic activity. Now what really happens? Actually, there are multiple areas in central nervous system which influence the hypothalamus and determine the balance of parasympathetic and sympathetic. Remember, all the time in your body there is some parasympathetic activity and some sympathetic, right? Usually they are considered to be opposing activity, but when there is stress, sympathetic activity goes up and parasympathetic activity goes down, and when you are relieved from the stress, sympathetic activity goes down and parasympathetic activity goes up. Is that clear? Now, how it is really regulated? Actually, one of the major regulator of this hypothalamus is your limbic system. Limbic system, which is represented by this shape, this limbic cortex is concerned with your emotions. What are the basic functions of limbic system? It is concerned with emotional behavior, and limbic system is also concerned with, not only with emotional behavior, limbic system is also concerned with short-term memory, and limbic system is also concerned with smell, and it is concerned with all the behavior which are, all the primitive behaviors which are concerned with species, survival, preservation and perpetuation. All the primitive behaviors which are concerned with species, survival, yes, then species, perpetuation, and then species, right, survival and perpetuation. For example, let me tell you, if dog is after you and it's about to bite you, it's a matter of species survival, isn't it? Limbic system should have some activity. Or this young man see a very beautiful girl, very much charming. Again, it's a matter of species survival or perpetuation? Perpetuation. Again, his limbic system should respond. Is that right? Now, limbic system is, you can say, the paramount area in the central nervous system concerned with your emotional activity. Is that right? We are very much emotional about our species survival and about our species perpetuation. Is that right? Now, actually, all the stressful information will go over here, right? How? For example, this young man, here it was auditory. What is this? Cortex. When this auditory cortex, when the dog was barking, auditory cortex were stimulated, and primary auditory cortex receives the barking information of the dog and then compared with it with the previous sounds and immediately recognized as unfriendly sound of a dog. And this unfriendly sound of the dog will give, fear center in the limbic system will be stimulated, number one. This is auditory input. Then he turns back and have a look on the dog, and he sees there's a big black dog rapidly approaching, right? This image is of course being found where? Yes please? In the visual cortex. Again, it's a friendly image or it's a hostile image? Hostile image. It will also stimulate limbic system, fear area. Then maybe he has some previous experiences from the childhood, with some dogs, unfriendly experiences, or maybe he has seen in some movies some dogs biting the people, right? Now horror movies are real movies depending upon reality. Now, memory centers are present in parietal lobe. So parietal lobe will also give that this is a stressful circumstances. Even though there is no time to think, but if he really thinks about the dog, thinking function is mainly done in frontal cortex. That will bring the pleasant thinking or unpleasant and frightful thought processes. Unpleasant. And if unfortunately dog really bites, ascending, which fibers will come? Pain fibers. Right? And those pain fibers will also add to the unpleasant stimulation, definitely. So all these things, what I am trying to say, that all the time your limbic system is receiving the information from different sources and analyzing this information, that what kind of emotional feelings and responses should be developed in the body. Is that right? Under these circumstances, when this young man is under stress and there is a big black dog following him eagerly, right? Under these circumstances, he is receiving maybe, what is this? Auditory, unfriendly, stressful information from the auditory system, stressful information from the visual system, stressful activation in the parietal system, and unpleasant memories related with the doggies, and maybe he think of the dog is really larger than him and it's going to take him away. So that will also add to further stress. And if it really bites somewhere on his body, then pain and the touch, of course not very friendly, that will also enhance the unpleasant sensations. So all these will lead to response of fear. Now this fear which is produced, this fear system will alter the activity in the parasympathetic as well as sympathetic. Right? From limbic system, input will come to the parasympathetic as well as to the sympathetic. The neurons which are going to the parasympathetic centers, they will be inhibitory, and neurons which are going to sympathetic part of the hypothalamus, they are stimulatory. So this is the limbic system which perceives the stress and alters the balance of highest autonomic centers in the hypothalamus, and sympathetic activity goes up and parasympathetic activity for a while goes down. Then what really happens? That from this, there are polysynaptic descending pathways. Polysynaptic, yes please, descending pathways. These pathways are going down in the spinal cord. Right? On the way, these are coming from the hypothalamus, maybe some reticular formation will also add to some information, maybe tractus solitarius and other brainstem nuclei will also modify the information. Eventually these sympathetic fibers, which are, you can say, polysynaptic descending pathways which are coming down, as they come down, you know that spinal cord is divided into, yes, which part of the spinal cord? Cervical spinal cord, yes. Thoracic spinal cord, then lumbar spinal cord, and then there is sacral and coccygeal. Now, what really happens, as these pathways are coming down, they will not stimulate any outgoing fibers in the brainstem, they will not stimulate any outgoing fiber from the cervical cord. What they will really do, that they will start stimulating pre-ganglionic, sympathetic fibers present in from T1 thoracic segment, T1 to T12. Then they will also stimulate, yes please, L1 and L2, in some cases even L3. So these are the areas. From here pre-ganglionic fibers will come out. These are thoracic outflow, and of course then there is, yes please, there is lumbar outflow. That is why sympathetic nervous system is anatomically considered thoraco-lumbar outflow. Sympathetic system is considered, yes please, of course doesn't include the sacral area, right? So it is because sympathetic fibers which are coming from the brainstem and some cervical cord, right? They start stimulating from T1 up to L2 or L3, and from here pre-ganglionic fibers are going out of the central nervous system, right? And that is why, because sympathetic pre-ganglionic system come out of central nervous system at the thoracic level and thoracic cord and upper lumbar cord, so we call it, yes please, thoraco-lumbar, yes please, lumbar outflow. Thoraco-lumbar outflow. Is that right? Now, what really happens? Let's suppose these pre-ganglionic fibers come out. Anatomically, I will make a diagram later, but for a while you just trust me. These fibers which come out, they will go to a ganglion. This is called sympathetic ganglion. Actually, on the side of there are some ganglion which are present at higher level of, and some ganglion which are present at lower level. Okay, I will make it complete. Now, these are the ganglion. Now, what really happens? Let's suppose all the fibers which are going to this ganglion, some of these fibers will terminate at this ganglion. Some of the fibers will go, yes please, at upper level and end up into some ganglion into above the level of exit. For example, it is T5. The fibers which are coming from T5, some of them will end up at the sympathetic chain ganglion at the same level. Some of the fibers will not end up here, they will go upward. Then some of the fibers may descend 1 or 2 ganglion downward. Is that right? And some of these pre-ganglionic fibers may simply traverse through the ganglion and then they end up into another ganglion which is called pre-vertebral ganglion. What is it called? Pre-vertebral ganglion. The classical example of pre-vertebral ganglion are your celiac ganglion, superior mesenteric ganglion, inferior mesenteric ganglion, right? So, all the fibers which come out, let's suppose it is T5, all the pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers which come out, let's suppose the 5 fiber come out. Fiber number 1 end up at the same level. Fiber number 2 ascends and then end up into upper ganglia. Fiber group number 3 end up into descends and end up into lower ganglion. And yeah, what is this? Okay, classically this was suppose group number 1, group number 2, group number 3, group number 4, and there is a group number 5 also. I'm just talking about that this is lower thoracic outflow and these pre-ganglionic fibers will come out. Group number 1, this is a whole bundle of fibers. It's not one fiber, there are thousands and thousands of the fiber. One group will terminate at the level of exit in the ganglion. Others will ascend upward and somewhere they will terminate in upper ganglion. Some will descend and end up into lower ganglion. Some will pass through the ganglion, not ending at the ganglion, not ending in the ganglion, sympathetic chain ganglion, not going upward, not going downward, rather traversing through that and going into prevertebral ganglion. And then some of them, in some cases, they may pass through it directly and then they end up into adrenal, yes please, medulla. They end up into adrenal medulla, from where they lead to release of epinephrine. Is that right? From here, then post-ganglionic fibers will start. Post-ganglionic fibers, look here. Post-ganglionic fibers start from sympathetic ganglion and then they go out to the tissues, or fibers go upward and from there post-ganglionic fibers go out, or fiber go downward and then post-ganglionic fibers go out. Now, if we are talking about this behavior that from every segment fibers come out, some end up at the same level, some go up and end up, some go down and end up. It means all the, what are these? Sympathetic ganglia, they are vertically connected with each other. Is that right? They are vertically connected with each other. Is that right? And a particular ganglion, suppose we talk about this ganglion, some fiber to this ganglion will be coming from the its own level, some may be coming from the below, some may be going from the top. It means when sympathetic stimulation occur, do you think one segment of nervous system will be activated or diffuse activation will be there? There will be diffuse activity. When sympathetic nervous system is activated, you cannot say that I have sympathetic activity increase in the right arm but not in the left arm, or you cannot say I have sympathetic activity increase in my you can say mouth but not in the rest of the body. Usually when sympathetic activity is increased, it increases all over the body. So that why? There are two reasons for that. Number one, there's sympathetic outflow, stimulate the outgoing structure at the level, above the level and below the level. Second reason is also there that sympathetic nervous system stimulates adrenal medullae and releases a lot of epinephrine, and this epinephrine which is released through the blood will diffusely in the body will lead to stimulation of all those tissues which are having receptors for epinephrine. Am I clear? Now let's go into some anatomical detail, right? How it really exactly happens. Now I'll make a frontal view of the diagram. Now we'll see sympathetic activity coming out of the central nervous system but with a frontal view, just to enhance a concept related with its midbrain, pons, medulla, spinal cord. What is this level? Yeah, cervical, then there is thoracic, then there is lumbar and sacral, right? I told you sympathetic from here polysynaptic pathways are coming down. Let me draw some segments of the spinal cord. The one suppose segment, there is another segment, then there is, let's suppose here is another segment, right? In the spinal cord segment, when we are drawing it, what it is? Now, what should really happen? I told you these are the blue fibers which are pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers. These pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers are present in this section. In this section there is, this is basically which part? Sensory neurons present over here. Sensory, grey horn, and what is here? This is motor, grey horn, right? Actually on this side, exactly, this is a area, this is dorsal horn of the spinal cord, this is ventral horn of the spinal cord, and this is considered intermedial lateral horn of the spinal cord. In this intermedial lateral horn of the spinal cord, now I'll draw it in slightly different way. Intermedial lateral horn of the spinal cord, there are special type of cell bodies present. These are the cell bodies here. These cell bodies are basically giving the fibers which will go out as, yes, pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers. Pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers. So when we talk about from where the pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers come out, we say anatomically speaking they are coming out through thoraco-lumbar cord. In the thoraco-lumbar cord, when you make a section, there is anterior horn, then intermediate or lateral horn, this is posterior horn. From the lateral horn, pre-ganglionic fibers have the cell bodies over there, and from these cell bodies pre-ganglionic fibers are coming out. It means from the top, the polysynaptic pathways which were coming down, they will basically stimulate them. From the top, when we are talking about polysynaptic fibers are coming out, as they go down, they stimulate anterior horn, posterior horn, or lateral horn? They stimulate lateral horn. So in this particular diagram, we can show that this is, you can say, which horn? Just please, lateral horn. And from the lateral horn, which fibers are coming out? Pre-ganglionic, right? Of course, they are coming bilaterally out. And from the top, from hypothalamus, there was, what was this? Polysynaptic descending pathway. They stimulate over here, then they descend from here, stimulate over here, like this. The same way they are descending on the opposite side also, and they will be stimulating as they are coming down to the outgoing pre-ganglionic. This is exactly what is happening, right? Then once this fiber come out, they will end up into ganglion on the side. What really happens, we will discuss after a few minutes. So we were talking about that how the sympathetic outflow exactly occurs from thoraco-lumbar region of the spinal cord with finer anatomical details, right? As I was telling that all the descending fibers of the sympathetic nervous system, these are passing through the lateral white matter, and when these descending fibers which are coming from hypothalamus passing through the brain stem, and while these fibers are passing through the brain stem, they are not stimulating any outflow whatsoever through the cranial nerves, and they are not stimulating any outflow through the cervical spinal cord. But as soon as they reach to the thoracic region, these fibers, descending fibers, start stimulating the neurons which are present, cell bodies of the neurons which are present in intermediolateral horn, right? And these cell bodies which are present in the intermediolateral horn, these cell bodies give the axons which go out through ventral root, and this is our pre-ganglionic sympathetic outflow. This pre-ganglionic sympathetic outflow extends from T1 up to L2 or L3. Is that right? Again, let me make it clear, there is no cranial nerve which has any sympathetic fibers when it exits out of the central nervous system. Of course, third, 7th, 9th and 10th, these nerves have parasympathetic outflows, but they do not have any sympathetic outflow. Now, once the fiber come out, now we have to clear the concept of white communicating rami and gray communicating rami, what they are, and anatomically how they are connected with the spinal cord and with the distal tissues. I will make more diagrams so that these two segments I will draw in a magnified way. Okay, we will draw the three segments of the spinal cord, and we will see how the outcoming sympathetic fibers are related with the spinal cord and with sympathetic about that we have made three, suppose, thoracic segments, right? And this is anterior horn, this is lateral horn, this is posterior horn. As I told you that sympathetic fibers have their pre-ganglionic cell bodies located in which horn? Lateral horn. And of course, these were the, these were your descending fibers which were stimulating these, which horn? Lateral horn. This polysynaptic descending pathway which were coming from the top, and they are stimulating the lateral horn. From the lateral horn, right, pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers go out into ventral root. From the ventral root, as a group, they jump to the sympathetic ganglion. This connection between the ventral root and the sympathetic ganglion is called white ramus or white rami communicants. Why we call it white ramus? Because it is myelinated, right? And fibers from the white ramus, it means from every point from T1 to L3, right? All the ventral roots are having white ramus which are connecting these roots with the sympathetic chain ganglion. Now, the fibers which come into ganglion, sympathetic ganglion, some fibers terminate at the same segment, at the same ganglion. Some fibers ascend upward and they terminate into upper ganglion. Some fibers, they descend downward and terminate into inferior ganglion. So it means all the fibers which come through the gray ramus to a particular sympathetic ganglion, all of them do not terminate there. Many of them simply traverse through that. Only few terminate there. The fibers which terminate there, right, from there, these fibers are either terminating, coming from the same gray ramus, or some fibers may be terminating into this ganglion and they are descending. Some fibers may be terminating into this middle ganglion which were ascending. All the fibers which terminate into this particular ganglion, they will be stimulating, yes, post-ganglionic sympathetic fibers, right? And here I want to highlight, there is a very small interneuron present over here, right? And these small interneurons are dopaminergic. But pre-ganglionic neurons release acetylcholine on post-ganglionic. So we can say pre-ganglionic sympathetic fibers are cholinergic. Here there is a basic principle. All the neurons which come out of central nervous system are cholinergic. All the pre-ganglionic neuron to the sympathetic ganglia are cholinergic. All the pre-ganglionic neurons for the parasympathetic ganglion are cholinergic. All the fibers which are coming from central nervous system and innervating neuromuscular junctions are also cholinergic. From today onwards, there is a very basic rule that all the neurons which come out of central nervous system are motor neurons, and all the neurons which come out of central nervous system are cholinergic. So we can say that preganglionic, parasympathetic, preganglionic, sympathetic, and all the fibers which are going to the neuromuscular junctions, all of them are cholinergic. So these blue fibers, which are preganglionic fibers, these are cholinergic, right? Either they release their acetylcholine directly on the cell bodies of the postganglionic neurons, or they release acetylcholine on interneurons. Interneurons are present, these are highly fluorescent neurons, right? These are present within the ganglion and these are dopaminergic. These are dopaminergic, right? Now, from here the postganglionic fibers have one route, that as a group postganglionic fibers from particular ganglion will jump to the relevant spinal nerve, and this connection from the sympathetic ganglion to the nearby associated spinal nerve, this connection is unmyelinated. It has all the fibers which are unmyelinated. So this is called gray rami or gray communicant rami. Now these gray rami fibers connect these sympathetic chain ganglia with the spinal nerves. The point which I want to highlight here, the white rami are connecting the sympathetic chain with the spinal nerves only from T1 to L3. White rami, which are the input from the input to the sympathetic ganglion, these white rami are present only from T1 to L3. But gray rami are output of the sympathetic chain. They are present throughout the spinal cord, because gray rami are distributed through all the spinal nerves. Now, when these gray rami take these fibers to this spinal nerve, some of these fibers will go into dorsal ramus and others will go into ventral rami, and eventually they will end up into limbs and anterolateral and posterolateral part of the body wall. Now, when they end up there, what they are doing there? They are supplying the vasculature of the limbs or body wall. They are supplying the skin sweat glands. They are supplying the erector pili muscle related with the you can say hair follicle, right? So we can say that all the, for example, if I say upper limb has sympathetic supply or no, answer is yes, it does have sympathetic supply. From where it came? It came from cervical sympathetic chain mainly, right? Now a cervical sympathetic chain got from where these sympathetic supply? It got it from the ascending fibers, is that right? From lower sympathetic ganglion, right? And where these sympathetic fibers are going? They are going for the skin and related appendages of the skin, maybe cutaneous blood vessels, maybe sweat glands, maybe erector pili, as well as they may be going for the other vasculature of the skin. Is that clear to everyone? Now, another thing, all of you know that sympathetic supply is not only going to the body wall structures, it is also going to the viscera. How it will go to the viscera? One way that it will go to the viscera is that some of the sympathetic fibers, they enter into ganglion, they do not terminate into ganglion, they do not ascend, they do not descend. They enter and simply traverse and exit from the ganglion. They are still which pre-ganglionic. They have passed through the ganglion, and eventually they may go to a ganglion which is very near to the viscera. Usually these are called prevertebral ganglion, and from these prevertebral ganglion, right, post-ganglionic fibers may be innervating to the viscera there. Now, how this prevertebral ganglion system and sympathetic ganglion system is different, listen. Sympathetic ganglia are present on the sides of the vertebral column. Prevertebral ganglia are present far away from there and they are not making chains. Sympathetic ganglion usually make prevertebral, these are paravertebral ganglion and these are prevertebral ganglion. Paravertebral ganglion make a chain. Prevertebral ganglia do not make a chain. Is that right? Classical example of prevertebral ganglion are celiac ganglion or superior mesenteric ganglion or inferior mesenteric ganglion. Now, attention please. From these ganglion, usually fibers go around blood vessels. For example, there is a blood vessel passing from here to this viscera. These fibers will jump from here and they move around the blood vessel, and through that they will innervate. So it means that to the viscera, blood sympathetic supply is coming around the blood vessels, and blood vessels are taking up the sympathetic supply from the prevertebral ganglion, not taking this sympathetic supply from the spinal nerves. Am I clear? Example of these post-ganglionic fibers may be subclavicular nerves. You have heard of superior subclavicular nerves, the inferior subclavicular nerves, or the cardiac nerves which supply the heart, sympathetic neurons which are supplying the heart. Now, you know what is the root value of the sympathetic fibers which are supplying the heart? Who knows it? It's very important because along with that some sensory fibers go from the heart and there is some relationship with the referred pain. So you must know the root value of the sympathetic fibers which are coming to the heart. Feel free to answer. Worst is that you will be wrong, but maybe you are right. Yeah. Anyone, just feel free, don't be shy. Heart is a viscera in your chest. Many of you know that. I'm asking about the sympathetic supply going to the heart. C5 to T2. Write it down and put a very, very big cross. How come C5 does not give any outflow? The fibers should be coming from T1 and down, not up. Because I'm talking about pre-ganglionic segments in the spinal cord. I'm not talking about the spinal nerves. I'm talking about that outflow of the sympathetic which is eventually going to the heart. It is exiting from T1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You hold your heart in 5 fingers. Is that right? So you have to remember it that there are 5 segments which are supplying to the heart. Which one? T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. Is that right? Why? Because referred pain will go into these segments, a related area, right? Anyway, but this T1, T2, T3, T4, T5 fibers, they will ascend upward. Now this is very important. They will ascend upward into sympathetic chain. They will go into cervical ganglion. From there will jump into out and make which? Cardiac nerves. And they will make cardiac nerves. Am I clear? Anyone who is not clear, please, you want to ask something? It's clear to everyone. Right, now, so what I'm talking about, listen carefully again, like the cardiac nerves or the splanchnic nerves going to the GIT or GIT viscera or GIT related, you can say glands, right? All these nerves are coming basically from the prevertebral ganglions. Now, another thing which I want to tell you, what did we learn? Again, listen, pre-ganglionic fibers come and terminate here, or they terminate above the level of exit, or they may be terminating below. Whatever fibers terminate here, right? Some of the fibers, post-ganglionic fibers from here will go back to the spinal nerve system. What is this? Grey horn. And input was what? White horn. Which fibers send upward, they may also go to the grey horn. Fibers which go down, they are also maybe going to the grey horn. Or some fibers simply traverse through that, attention please. Or from here they traverse upward and without synapting here, they traverse out. Or some they go down and then traverse out. So these are still pre-ganglionic fibers which have passed through the sympathetic chain but not having termination there. They will eventually terminate where? In prevertebral ganglion, and from there branches will go around the blood vessels to the distant organs or visceral organs. Is that clear to everyone? Any question here? Now one more point which was important. Again recap. Fiber enter here, terminate here. Fiber go upward and terminate there in the chain. Fiber go down and terminate within the chain. Or fiber simply traverse through that and go to the prevertebral ganglion. Or they go upward and then go to the prevertebral ganglion. Or they go downward and then go to the prevertebral ganglion. But one thing which we did not discuss up to now. Some fibers, they come into this, they simply traverse through that and they go into adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla is basically, you can say phylogenetically, it is like post-ganglionic adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla is innervated by sympathetic pre-ganglionic fibers, and actually it consists of, functionally you can say it consists of post-ganglionic. How adrenal medulla is made? Many sympathetic ganglion put together make adrenal medulla. Many sympathetic ganglion put together make sympathetic ganglion. So naturally adrenal medulla should have pre-ganglionic fibers, but its post-ganglionic cell bodies have degenerated their axons. It's a very important point, that adrenal medulla is just like many sympathetic ganglion clumped together. They are having pre-ganglionic fibers coming from the spinal cord, but they do not have post-ganglionic fibers. Post-ganglionic cells, bodies are there, but they have degenerated their ganglion. So they pour out there, you can say, substance which is, what is that? Mainly epinephrine with little norepinephrine, right? This will go into general circulation. So it means, attention please, viscera are going to receive, or all the tissues which are having receptors for the adrenergic system, adrenergic neurotransmitter, they receive the norepinephrine mainly through the innervation, norepinephrine through the innervation from the nerve endings of postganglionic. For example, if I draw a heart over here, okay, let's replace the GIT with heart. Here lies your heart. Now, of course, heart, SA node or AV node, another part of the heart, they are having cardiac sympathetic fibers coming over here. These fibers are releasing what substance here? Mainly norepinephrine. But heart has blood supply also, and through the blood, it is also receiving what? Epinephrine. So all the cardiac adrenergic receptors, either they are stimulated by norepinephrine directly released on the nearby the receptor through innervation, or they may be stimulated by epinephrine which is coming through the circulation, which was originally released by adrenal medulla. Am I clear? Is there any question about this young man? And let's suppose here is that man, this is his road. You know what is happening, he is escaping. Right, here is this young man and dog is after him, and his sympathetic nervous system all over the body is activated. Right, it's all over the body activated. The reason is very simple, because dog is really aggressive and bigger. Otherwise, you know, if dog was really small one, then whose sympathetic nervous system would be activated? Dog's, because he will be after the dog, right? But right now the circumstances are the dog is after him. It's dark night, it's moon night, or moonlit night, whatever. My English is not that good about the moon, but anyway. So it's dark, he is alone in the woods, and there's a energetic dog following him. His central nervous system, as I told you, has perceived threat. There was visual threat, there was auditory threat, and there may be even some touch and bite. So all these things stimulated the downgoing sympathetic fibers, which led to the thoraco-lumbar sympathetic outflow. Thoraco-lumbar sympathetic outflow, basically many fibers that terminated, these fibers came out through which rami? Wide rami, from T1 to L3. These wide rami were connected with the sympathetic chain. From the sympathetic chain, some fibers terminated at the level, some went up and then terminated, some pre-ganglionic went down the level and terminated, and from there grey rami re-entered into spinal system. And fibers at the grey rami which re-entered into spinal nerves, those fibers were taking the sympathetic post-ganglionic innervation to his body wall structures and to the limbs. Then we said many fibers simply passed through and eventually terminated some ganglion which are pre-vertebral ganglion or their analog. From there, post-ganglionic fibers went round the blood vessels and they innervated the viscera. Then we were talking about many pre-ganglionic fibers terminated on adrenal medulla, and from there epinephrine was injected into blood. So in the end, what will happen to him? All the organs in his body which are sensitive to epinephrine or norepinephrine, their function will alter, right? All the tissues in his body which are having adrenergic receptors, right, those adrenergic receptors will be stimulated either by norepinephrine, which is coming from the post-ganglionic nerve ending. Remember, most of the sympathetic post-ganglionic nerve endings release norepinephrine, very few release acetylcholine. For example, few fibers of sympathetic nervous system release, post-ganglionic fibers of sympathetic nervous system release acetylcholine. For example, the fibers going to the sweat glands, right? But most of them are releasing norepinephrine. So norepinephrine will be coming to the tissue through post-ganglionic sympathetic nerve endings, and epinephrine will be reaching to the tissues through circulation, right? Norepinephrine and epinephrine are going to alter the tissue function. Now tissue function will alter in such a way, because there are multiple tissues in the body. Some tissues help us under the stress, so those tissues should be stimulated, and there are other tissues which do not help us under the stress, so those tissues should be inhibited. So it means that now the basic principle which we have to learn is that increased sympathetic activity, what it has done? It has led to the release of norepinephrine and epinephrine, and this will alter the tissue function. It will act on the receptors and alter the tissue function. So naturally, there are some tissues which are helpful, and all the tissues which are helpful to fight with the stress, they should be stimulated, right? Opposite to that, the other tissues which do not help during the stress, and they may be inhibited. It means all the tissues in his body which can respond to adrenergic drive, right, some will increase their function and others will decrease their function, right? Now which tissues are stimulated, which help in the fighting of the stress, and which tissues should be inhibited, which do not help in the fighting the stress? Now all the tissues which should be stimulated by adrenergic system should have alpha 1 adrenergic receptors. All the tissues to be stimulated by the adrenergic drive should have which receptors? Alpha 1 adrenergic receptors, except which one? Except there are three: heart, juxta glomerular apparatus in the kidney, juxtaglomerular apparatus which produces renin in the kidney, and third was lipocytes or lipocytes. Except these tissues which are stimulated but they are not having alpha 1 receptors, they are having beta 1 adrenergic receptors. So heart has beta 1 adrenergic receptors, juxtaglomerular apparatus has beta 1 adrenergic receptors, and lipocyte also have beta 1 adrenergic receptors. Let me re-narrate the situation. All the tissues to be inhibited should have, these are generalizations, there are few exceptions, we will not talk about them right now. Generally speaking, all the tissues to be stimulated should have alpha 1 or beta 1 receptors. All the tissues to be stimulated should have alpha 1 or beta 1 receptors, and all the tissue to be inhibited should have alpha 2 or beta 2 adrenergic receptors. Now listen, let's come back. Let me re-narrate it, it really needs some emphasis. All the tissues to be stimulated should have type 1 receptor, either alpha 1 or beta 1. Now, which one will develop alpha 1? All the tissues to be stimulated should have which receptors? Alpha 1, except heart, juxtaglomerular apparatus in the kidney, and lipocytes. These are having beta 1, and lipocytes have modified beta 1 receptor which is also called beta 3. Is that right? So if I say in your tissue, in his body, there are 10 tissues to be stimulated, all of them will have which receptor? Alpha 1 adrenergic receptor, but these 3 will have beta 1. In the same way, now come to the tissue to be inhibited. All the tissues to be inhibited should have beta 2 receptors. Write it down. All the tissues to be inhibited should have beta 2 receptors, except all the tissues to be inhibited should have beta 2 receptors, except presynaptic nerve endings which have alpha 2, or platelets which may have alpha 2, and some part of GIT may have alpha 2. These 3 exceptions are there. So it means, generally speaking, if attention plays, this is a tissue to be stimulated, it should have which receptor? Alpha 1. And if it is heart or juxtaglomerular apparatus or adipocyte, it should have